Well, today we celebrate Epiphany. For one, it's the 12th day of after Christmas and Pastor Michael and Janie's birthday. So the story for so far, we had Christmas. Joseph and Mary had started traveling while Mary was pregnant, and they started traveling from where they were living, going to Bethlehem, because Joseph was from the line of David, and they were to go to where their ancestors were from. And although Bethlehem wasn't much of a town, it did have a claim to fame as being the hometown and birthplace of King David. Most of the things that we know about the Nativity and the birth story come from the Gospel of Luke. But the story of the wise men is only found in the book of Matthew. Everything that we know about them for sure is in this one passage. There are no other accounts of the Magi and Jesus. So while Mary and Joseph are enjoying their newborn son and all that has happened, little do they know that hundreds of miles away, the Magi are coming. So why were they coming? They were most likely of a sect called Zoroastrians, followers of a guy named Zoroaster, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. But basically, it was kind of a religion that originated somewhere in Iran, and they believed in sort of a combination of astrology and astronomy. They weren't two different fields back then. So what they did is they observed the stars and looked for signs. And the priests of this Zoroastrianism were called Magi. And so they think that, although there's other theories of exactly what they were, kings or whatever, they think that it's most likely that they were some sort of priestly caste from these Zoroastrians. So they weren't Jewish, but they probably had enough familiarity with Jews in their area where they were from that they knew about the predictions of the Messiah. They studied the predictions of different prophets. And when they saw this new star in the sky, they decided that it must be a Jewish king that had been born, because it was not uncommon for them to associate new stars or very unusual phenomenon in the sky with the birth of a very important person. And so because they had decided that this must be a sign due to some scriptures that are related to the Jews. Even though they weren't Jewish, they decided to go ahead and go to Jerusalem. So at this point, they weren't following the star. They had just noticed the star. And so they decided to go to Jerusalem. So we have in our minds this romantic version, and it's on all our Christmas cards, of the three kings traveling on their camels through the desert with the star in the background. In all likelihood, they probably went a little bit higher north instead of going straight through the desert. And they most likely had a group or caravan with them, and it probably wasn't just three individuals. We don't know exactly how many magi there were, but the guess is three because there were three gifts. Some Eastern Church religions think there may have been as many as 12. Legends in the Catholic Church talk about giving them names like Melchior, Casper, and Saint Balthasar. Those are most likely embellishments to the story because there's not really any proof in the Bible that there was three to begin with or what their names were. There was a document from about 500 years after 500-year Common Era, 500 AD as we count it now, that had the story of that, and it was most likely an embellishment to give some meaning behind everything. But we don't know for sure that that was their names. But it does make a good story. So back to our story. The wise men traveled here to Jerusalem to find out exactly what was going on. So here's King Herod being a king when these foreigners show up and ask him where this new king has been born. And this is news to him because as far as he's concerned, he's the king of the Jews. So he calls together all his top scholars and priests, and he asks them, what do you mean what do you think this means? This, sign that they've seen, this star. What does this mean? And they decide that it was most likely the scripture that we read today that says Bethlehem. So they say, well, we think that if this has happened, the most likely place is Bethlehem. So here they start following the star from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. Over the years, people have tried to explain the star, saying possibly it could have been Halley's Comet or another comet. But the problem with comets is that in that time they were generally considered bad omens. And they were associated with the 4 Ds: doom, death, disease, and disaster. Plus, comets are much more common. So most likely, if it was a comet, the Magi probably wouldn't have been too excited about it. Another theory is the alignment of 3 stars that belong to the constellation of Pisces, and that the alignment was something that would only happen every 900 years or so, and that would be something very noticeable in the sky. 2 planets align makes them much brighter, and 3, that would be quite a sight. There are other scientific explanations too, but the truth is that even if there weren't a good scientific explanation, it wouldn't be the first time that God had led his people somewhere. We only have to look at Genesis to see when Moses was led through the desert with a pillar of cloud. If he wanted to, he could create the image of a star to lead the Magi through the desert. And that is what many believe that the author Matthew was trying to capture. Not a natural phenomenon, but something extremely out of the ordinary. So the Magi arrive in Bethlehem, and it seems that Mary and Joseph are now in a house. In the manger story in Luke, they're in a manger. But when we see the Magi meeting the Holy Family in Matthew, they're in a house. And it says that they saw the child with Mary, and they fell on their knees to honor him. One of the interesting things here is that there isn't more said about this visit. What is not here is just as interesting as what is said. In stories from other religions, it's not uncommon for babies to do supernatural things like talk, even though they're young. There's even a story from another document, not inside the Bible, about Elijah. Then they say that he ate flames. But there are no miraculous claims about what toddler Jesus did, or what Mary and Joseph said when the rich foreigners showed up at their doorstep to worship their toddler. We all think our toddlers are precious, but I've never had 3 rich people show up to offer them gifts. In our verse, it says that they offered gifts of gold, myrrh, and frankincense. And in the very next sentence, it says they were warned in a dream not to return to Herod. And so they disobeyed Herod and went back by another route. The excitement of Epiphany is that Jesus was revealed as Messiah to the world, not just for the Jews, but for people even as unexpected as these Gentiles, these non-Jewish, star-reading Persians or Iranians. They changed their plan as a result of their encounter with Jesus, the Messiah. The word that they use for Jesus at this age, if it were more specific, we could know exactly how old he was. But unfortunately, the word they use could be used for a child anywhere from a week old up to maybe a 10-year-old child running around in the marketplace with their friends. So take a moment to consider the disobedience of the Magi. They traveled to see a king that wasn't of their belief system. They offered expensive gifts. They disobeyed Herod the Great, which could cost them their lives. And they did this all as a result of their encounter with Jesus, the child, as well as the dream that they had warning them. And think about the Herods in your own life. Maybe bosses who wanted you to do something that was against your moral compass. I knew somebody that had started work at a car lot and had nightmares and guilt that just weighed on them that resulted in them having to quit. Because a girl had come in with a sports car that was more valuable than another car in the lot that she wanted to purchase. The dealer knew there was some trouble with that car, and so my friend knew that there was trouble with this car, and yet this girl left without her sports car, with this car with problems, owing them a whole lot more money than what her car that she traded in was worth. My friend had an extreme case of guilt and just decided this was not the field for them. Friends and coworkers sometimes can pressure you to doing something that's not right or out of alignment with your beliefs. It could be something as small as gossiping, or it could be a coworker talking you into a drink when you know that you can't just have one. Think about the crossroads that you've been at this past year. Think about the times in your life when you felt you were supposed to go a certain way and had to decide between going the way you felt you were supposed to go and where you were being led to go. Sometimes we go down roads because people tell us to go that way. Sometimes we go because we think we know what's best for us, and then God tells us He has other plans. I myself had a lot of ideas of what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I was young, I wanted to be an artist, a cook, a pharmacist, a psychologist, and then a social worker, and now I'm a pastor. 4 or 5 years ago, I was sitting in the pew, praying with no particular prayer in mind, other than for general guidance and for God's will to be done. I was excited because I was getting ready to turn my application into IUN to pursue a master's in social work. I had started filling out my application, gotten my referrals together, sent away for my APA style manual so I could write my paper, and I came in to pray. And Lee Coffey had preached that day because it was a laity Sunday. It came time for prayer, and I looked down, and it was weird. I felt like I got smacked in the back of my head with a frying pan. Not that I have ever been smacked in the head with a frying pan, I swear. But I felt a distinct smack in the back of my head, and it hurt. And I just knew that I was supposed to go into ministry and that I needed to stop my application and go the other way. So I was working coffee bar that day, and after service I went out to coffee bar, and when I saw Pastor Deb walk by, I flagged her down and I said, "Hey, how did you do that whole pastor thing?" And the rest is history. I had chosen a road that I thought was what I wanted for my path, and God kind of steered me the other direction. In this story we have Herod, and Herod can be the paths that lead to darkness. We have the Magi, who were not the expected disciples, but who out of love disobeyed and risked their lives for the Christ child. We have many decisions. Maybe your decisions aren't life and death, but they matter. Are you choosing the God-pleasing choices? Do you need guidance? Many times we think and we get stressed out because we think that it's up to us to make these right decisions. We forget that God is in charge, and we need to take that time to be still, to listen, not to be asking for anything, just to be still and to listen. And God promises that He will lead us. The Lord is my shepherd. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Amen.
Amen.